Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, and now we're down to two. That's right. What was considered the greatest Final Four of all time delivered us two outstanding games Saturday night, and now we are down to Florida and Houston to battle it out Monday night for the College Basketball National Championship 2025. Here on this episode, we're going to break down everything you need to know about this game, talk about our leans for different kind of bets and player props, as well as a Showdown DFS perspective as well. So no matter what your angle is here from this game, we're going to give you guys all the best info in order to pick the winners and pick the correct lines on this game in order to make yourself some money here Monday night. And I don't know about y'all, but I kind of need to make some money Monday night. I had everything played out perfectly. Everything played out perfectly in a survivor entry where I had one survivor entry left and I had Florida and Duke remaining. And so my grand plan was to pick Florida to beat Auburn. And then I was going to pick Duke to beat Florida Monday night. And I was going to win my share of $10,000. That was not the case. Other things happened. Now, heading into Saturday night, I thought I had a great idea to hedge. I ended up doing a 4-point teaser on the UConn women and the Auburn men. And so I had Auburn plus 6.5 heading into that game. And so basically, if Auburn won or kept it close, I was going to able to hedge a little bit of that survivor money, right? Well, good news for me. Auburn kept it close. They lost by exactly 6 and Florida won. So my survivor entry stayed alive. And I was able to also cash some extra money on that bet along the way. And then heading into the night game, I was sitting down watching it and I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to hedge on this one. I'm not even going to put money on Houston to cover or Houston to win money line or anything like that because I was just so confident that Duke was going to win. I was so confident that Duke was the better basketball team. And you know what? I still think Duke's the better basketball team. But Houston, credit to them for their grit, their toughness, their culture, just everything in terms of intangibles that won them that game. I still think Duke's better basketball. But Houston's intangibles won them that game, along with a few questionable calls from the refs, in my opinion. I thought that Houston got away with a lot of contact on some inbounds passes. I thought that Houston got away with a lot of contact on Cooper Flagg on his final shot. I thought that the over the back foul on Cooper Flagg was absolutely bogus. But hey, you know, if you're Duke, you very easily had many opportunities to not let that come down to officiating. And so credit to Houston, credit to what they did in order to win that game. And so now we're left with Florida and Houston. And like I said, my survivor entry is dead. I thought I had it planned out perfectly. I really did. But now we've got one game, and I think I've got a pretty good read on it. And so we're going to go over everything you need to know about this game. We're going to tell you everything you need to know about these two teams, and hopefully we're going to give you guys plenty of information to help you guys make some money here on this game Monday night. Now, before we get started with the game breakdown, I do want to say, if you have not subscribed to the channel already, please do so. I know this college basketball season's wrapping up, but we're going to be turning into a golf, best ball, and college football show all the way up until when college basketball comes back, and then we're kind of back to being a college basketball show again. So if you want to be with us for college basketball next year, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, or if you want to be with us for all of the extra content as well, you'll be here for that. It is Masters Week coming up, which is one of my favorite weeks on the golf calendar, so we are going to have some content for that. So if you're subscribed, you will be able to get all the information for that as well. But let's go ahead and let's break it down. Let's dive into this national championship game. So the crazy part about doing this is watching the games Saturday night, all the while planning on, having to do all this preparation and having, to get all this information for it to be a Florida Duke national championship game. And that ends up being a Florida Houston. So, obviously I had to pivot a little bit here. But the good news is this. Here's why I think that this game is actually a pretty easy read, in my opinion. Both of these teams played to their analytical profiles in their Saturday night Final Four game. Like they really did. And that's why I think this one's going to be pretty easy to determine, is because if these teams play to their profile again, then it's going to be an easily predictable outcome, right? So looking at it right now, KenPom has this game projected to be Houston 72-71. That is a game total of 143 points. Depending on the line you might see in Vegas, you might see Florida as a slight favorite, but its spread's going to be pretty close no matter where you look at it. And that total of 143 points is also interesting to me. So basically, when you look at these two teams, right, Florida is second in offensive efficiency nationally, ninth in defensive efficiency nationally. That kind of played out in their game against Auburn, right? Houston, ninth in offensive efficiency nationally, first in defensive efficiency nationally. That played out in their game against Duke. Like, you watch these two games and you see the outstanding offense of Florida, you see the outstanding defense of Houston, and everything else in their statistical profiles played out. Florida's relative weakness is in guarding big men. Janai Broome had a really solid game. If they got him the ball more in the second half, could have had a bigger game. Houston's relative weakness is offensive boards, and Duke actually rebounded the ball fairly well in that game. Houston's relative weakness also is their size. Duke's size stood out in that game, but like what these teams do, they did at their best in their Final Four games, right? Like Houston plays very fast. They did that against Auburn. Florida plays very fast. They did that against Auburn. Houston plays very slow. They tried to slow the game down against Duke. Now, one thing that I will say as an early lean on this game, I really think that this game is going to go under the total. I really do. That's just my theory on this game. Ken Palm's got it at 143. Depending on what books you look at, it's going to be somewhere close to that, especially, as I'm recording this, the line's probably going to change, so I'm not going to even worry about what the exact number is, but I think it's going to go under the total. Auburn, when you watch them, Auburn is a team that's used to playing at a decently fast tempo. They're in like the 100s in tempo rating, whereas Houston is in the 300s, and Auburn did not want to get into a track meet against Florida. Auburn was looking to slow that game down every opportunity they had. Auburn was looking to not let Florida get out and run every opportunity they had. I think Houston's strategy is going to be very much the same. And so for that reason, I think this game is probably going to go under the total. And for what it's worth, both of the Final Four games probably should have went under. Florida and Auburn was a very easy under hit. Duke and Houston, if the last minute and 30 seconds played out any differently, the under would have hit, because the very last free throw by, I believe it was Malik. No, it was LJ Cryer. The very last free throw by LJ Cryer put the game over the total, at least with the line that I had on DraftKings. So if you think about if Juwan Roberts is not awarded the one-on-one from the Cooper flag over the back and Houston holds for the last shot, then the game is going to go under the total no matter what, because Houston would have won it or lost it 68-67 or 67-66. So really, I think the unders probably should have cashed Saturday night, and I expect the under to cash here in this one. In terms of a lean for the whole game, I'm going to be rolling with Florida. And it is because I'm just a believer in teams being good at basketball, right? Like you watch Florida's offense, they have an elite playmaker in Walter Clayton Jr., who is also an elite closer. He's great in the second halves and closing stretches of games. And they generate really good shots. Their weaknesses and emphasize their strengths. On the Houston side, Houston against Duke for the large part of the game did not get off quality shots, and they were reliant on LJ Cryer hitting tough contested jump shots. They were reliant on Juwan Roberts hitting tough contested post shots and offensive rebounds as well. And so I think that Florida is probably going to limit that offensive rebounding better than Duke did. Florida out-rebounded Auburn by 9 in their game. So I really think that Florida a better rebounding team than Duke. Florida a better closing team than Duke because of their guard play. And so I think that the weaknesses of Duke that Houston was able to exploit, I don't think are going to be the case here with Florida. Florida, better guard play than Duke, better closing team, better rebounding team. I think that really another thing with Houston is that Houston's bigs are all old and very strong, and Duke's bigs, they're kind of young. On the Florida side, though, they're not the oldest in the book, but they are, big and strength, and like they played against guys like this Houston team. They just went toe-to-toe with Janai Broom and Dylan Cardwell. So I'm rolling with Houston here to win this game. All right, now let's go ahead and let's talk about this from a player props in DFS perspective, right? So let's go ahead and let's look at the board on DraftKings for Showdown DFS here this slate. So my biggest piece of advice with this Showdown DFS for this slate, y'all, is build a narrative-based lineup, right? So if you're playing Showdown, you want to tell a story with your lineup. You want to have an outcome in your mind of how the game is going to play out, and then you want to build a lineup that is going to be, if the game plays out how you expect it to, then those guys are going to score the most fantasy points. That's exactly how you want to do it. And, a lot of people will give the advice, oh, you want to be unique. You don't want to split the money. Well, I would rather have the optimal lineup and split the money 8 ways than not have the optimal lineup and not win the money, right? So I really think that build a lineup that makes sense, build a lineup where the construction you see actually winning all the money. And I think that that's kind of the overarching best piece of advice that I can give you when it comes to Showdown DFS is tell that story with your lineup and tell it with conviction, right? Don't hedge on your story. Don't, try to do too much to balance everything out. Tell your story and tell it with conviction. Now, one of the very likely stories for this game could be Walter Clayton Jr. dominating, right? Like, I know that Houston is an elite defensive team, especially on the perimeter, but Walter Clayton Jr. is just on an absolute tear right now. Back-to-back games of 42 DraftKings points or more, back-to-back games of 30 real points or more, on both of which were over 50% shooting from the field, both of which, 6 rebounds plus assists, decent in the peripherals, right? So I really think Walter Clayton Jr., everything on Florida is going to go through him. And I would be shocked if he does not have a good game in this one. And I'll be honest, if he does not have a good game, Florida's probably not going to win. So this Florida, if you're building a lineup with the expectation that Florida is going to win, or if you're betting on the game with the expectation that Florida is going to win, it is highly likely to me that it comes with the corollary that Walter Clayton Jr. plays well. So for that reason, he is going to be one of my favorite plays in Showdown DFS because, as we just talked about, I expect Walter Clayton Jr. to play well, and I expect Florida to win this game. Now, after Clayton at the guard spots, you can get random big games out of Elijah Martin and Will Richard. So to me, Martin is kind of the better conventional look from the two of them, right? Because Martin is a much better peripheral stat player, averages almost 5 boards, over 2 assists, and a steal and a half per game. And he was pretty good against Auburn, right? Like efficient 6 for 10 from the field, played almost the whole game, 2 for 3 from 3, only amounted to 22 DraftKings points because he did not get a whole lot of peripherals. So there's two ways you can kind of look at this. You can look at it and say, okay, he had an efficient scoring game against a decent defensive Auburn team, and now he's going against Houston, so it'll probably be less efficient scoring, and he only put 22 DraftKings points. That's not a good sign. The counterpoint would be, though, hey, he normally gets more peripheral stats than this, so if he does get his peripherals, back to normal, he could end up having a very good game if he continues his efficient scoring. I kind of see both sides of that coin. However, one piece of advice I will give, though, I am going to be opting to play Will Richard over Elijah Martin. And here's the reason why. So when you look at Houston's defense gives up catch and shoot jump shots at an enormous rate because they are always super aggressive and they look to either trap or ice ball screens, which brings an extra defender into the ball screen action, which is going to be leaving shooters open on the perimeter because of the spacing that it creates. Will Richard is Florida's catch and shoot guy. Granted, he has not shot the ball all that well recently. He's not made a 3 in either of the last 2 games, combined 0 for 5. In fact, he's a combined 3 for 12 from the field. I just think that means he's in for some positive shooting regression. And oh, by the way, his peripheral stats are actually really good right now. 6 boards against Auburn, 3 steals in that game. Against Texas Tech, he had 2 boards, 2 assists, and a block. So you're looking at a guy who is putting up peripheral stats at his kind of usual rate recently. And you're looking at a guy who I believe is going to get extra looks from 3, which can be oh so valuable in DraftKings scoring when you get an extra bonus per 3-point shot made. I think Will Richard is going to be a guy I'm going to be targeting heavily in Showdown DFS. And I'm likely going to be pairing him with Walter Clayton because if they're blitzing the ball screens that Walter Clayton's in, then there's a chance that Clayton's going to be getting assists off of that. Now, Florida's only guard they use off the bench is Denzel Aberdeen. He pretty much spells all 3 guards, Richard, Clayton, and Martin. So if any of the Florida guards get in foul trouble, you would see a boost for Denzel Aberdeen. And he is very active when he's out there. He plays with a high usage rate, but really you are dependent on one of those guards getting in foul trouble or struggling mightily to the point that they have to get benched if you want to see more Aberdeen. I think he's a solid value play option in terms of telling a narrative. Like, hey, if your narrative is going to be Walter Clayton dominates and Richard and Martin struggle, and so Aberdeen has to fill in, then to me, that's a viable story to tell, right? So I think he is a viable play. He is not my favorite play on the board, but I think he's a viable play because of what he can give you in terms of a narrative piece in your Showdown DFS lineup. Now, for the forwards for Florida, they will play 4 of them, and they will pretty much have 2 of them on the floor at all times between Thomas Houck, Alex Condon, Ruben Chinyelu, and Micah Hanlockton. Let's start at the bottom first. Micah Hanlockton is the backup center. He is recovering from an injury. He was their starting center last year before he got hurt, and he just hasn't been the same player, hasn't gotten a whole lot of run in games that aren't blowouts. He is the tallest of all the Florida centers and big men, but I just don't have a whole lot of faith in him to play a whole lot of minutes in this one unless someone were to get in some serious foul trouble, and probably multiple guys get in serious foul trouble. So I'm just not really here for him at 3,900, but I'm telling you he's an option. Ruben Chinyelu is the starting center, and when he stays out of foul trouble, he tends to be very good. What worries me, though, is I do believe they're going to have him guarding Juwan Roberts on the other end, and Juwan Roberts is a guy that can get you in foul trouble. He doesn't have the best foul drawn rate in the nation, but Juwan Roberts is a guy that plays super physically, can draw some fouls. But Chinyelu, if he does stay on the floor, he's going to give you 20 plus minutes. He's going to give you a chance at a double-double because his rebounding rates are really, really good. But he's got to stay out of foul trouble. He's got to stay on the floor to do it. And so for that reason, you look at his game log, he's got 2 out of his last 3 above 19 DraftKings points. But that other one against Texas Tech, just not the game for him with how their bigs shaped up. And he only played 11 minutes, only put up 8 DraftKings points. So you've got a very volatile profile here in Ruben Chinyelu, but I do understand him as a play because of the upside that he brings. If you're argument is, hey, well, Houston has these super old, super physical bigs. Who of the Florida guys is the old physical one? That would be Chinyelu. And so if you think that he matches up well against these Houston bigs, he would be a guy that you could absolutely put in your lineups. Alex Condon was a core play for me on the Final Four slate against Auburn, and he really struggled. He was 0 for 5 from the field, never really got going, got in a little bit of foul trouble in the second half, and fouled out late in the game. Only put up 11 DraftKings points. But to me, this is a great situation for him to bounce back. I think he could provide a lot of value to this Florida offense because he is the guy that can stretch the floor and shoot the three a little bit. He's also significantly taller than the two Houston bigs, standing at about 6'11", and Houston's guys are all 6'8". So I really do think this could be a good spot for Condon, and I think he's at a very reasonable price tag, and you're kind of buying the dip if you want to play Condon. I think the overall best play for the Florida bigs, though, is Thomas Houck. He comes off the bench, but do not be fooled. Out of all the bigs the Florida has in the Auburn game, he played the most minutes, and he also took the most shots out of all of them. Like he's good, y'all. And in that game, he had 12 and 7, had some great defensive plays down the stretch, big time rebounds down the stretch. He's just, to me, he's the best play out of all of them. He's the best one out of all of them, and he's a guy that I'm going to be investing in heavily here in Showdown DFS on this Florida side. That is everybody that is in Florida's rotation. So now let's go ahead and move on to the Houston side. Oh, and one other thing I forgot to mention. We mentioned that Houston's relative weakness defensively is their defensive rebounding rate. And so to me, Condon and Houck, who are the two preferred Florida bigs, could certainly get a boost in rebounds, and Chinyelu, if he's able to stay on the floor, or if Houck or Condon were to be off the floor, he could get a boost for rebounding as well. I think that the Florida bigs rebounding is a prop that you could target here in this one. Now, on the Houston side, we mentioned this already, but their offense really rolls through two players. Their usage leader against Duke was Juwan Roberts, which is interesting, right? Because basically, when Juwan Roberts has the ball, he doesn't generate efficient shots. He's getting the ball in post-up situations, and he's not usually generating like wide open layups. He's generating like contested hook shots or like super physical through contact finishes, right? So he's just a weird player in that regard, but he's an elite level rebounder on both sides of the ball. He's also a pretty good passer, especially on outlet passes. So if he gets defensive rebounds, he can get you some assists. In that Duke game, he actually had 5 assists. Now, one thing that's really interesting, in that Duke game, he killed it, had 40 DraftKings points, right? And here's the most interesting part of this to me. Florida, if you watch the Florida-Auburn game, they were very content to guard the post with Broom straight up one-on-one and not double and not leave shooters wide open, and not let the Auburn guards get going offensively. If that is the plan against Houston and Juwan Roberts is going to get the ball early and often. He's going to be able to win his one-on-one matchup enough that he's going to be able to put up a lot of DraftKings points. And so for me, Juwan Roberts, especially when you consider his price tag down here as the third highest priced Houston guy, to me, he's one of the top plays on the entire slate, not just on the Houston side, but in terms of a DraftKings showdown perspective, I think he's one of the top plays on the entire slate. He's going to be in a ton of my lineups because he's priced down very low. And if Florida comes out with the same game plan, he's going to be able to eat if he gets solo matchups against that Florida front court. Now, since we're already talking about Roberts, let's finish it off with the rest of the Houston forwards. So Houston's starting center is Joseph Tugler, had 26 DraftKings points against Duke, but it was largely because he had 4 blocks and a steal. Look, he's just not a big-time factor in the offense. He kind of just stands in the dunker spot and looks to get boards. He plays a ton of minutes because he's such a good defender. He's just not the type of profile guy I like targeting in DFS formats. If your counter argument is, well, Houston or Florida's bigs are good offensively, they're going to need Tugler's defense. I get that, and that's an argument for him to be on the floor for more minutes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to put up a whole lot of counting stats because he just doesn't have the ball in his hands a whole lot. So he's just not my favorite play, like overall. And then their backup big, the only one they play is Javier Francis. He played 14 minutes against Duke, 15 minutes against Tennessee. That's about what you can pencil him in for if there's not serious foul trouble among the starting Houston bigs. With Kelvin Sampson, though, Kelvin Sampson is old school. He's a big-time believer in the 2 fouls in the first half and sit the bench until halftime. Don't get me started on that. To me, in college basketball, that is such an antiquated strategy. I think that it's got to go, but that's his thing. And so if Roberts or Tugler gets in foul trouble in the first half, Javier Francis is probably going to play a lot of minutes. Now, as I mentioned here on the show before, I do coach high school basketball. We operate on that 2 foul rule for our high school guys in the regular season because they have to learn that like, hey, if it's like Pavlovian conditioning, if I foul, I go to the bench. And so that's a way for them to learn to not get in foul trouble, right? But then when you get to the postseason, you play your best players and you look to get as many minutes out of them as you possibly can, right? And so hopefully they learn that lesson in the regular season that hey, I don't need to foul. So yeah, in college, though, it's got to go. You got to trust these guys. Most of these guys are grown men at this point. You got to trust them to be able to not foul. To me, the only upside on Javier Francis would be if you think that Roberts and Tugler end up in foul trouble, which is a possibility because Florida does use their bigs quite a lot. Now, from the guard spot for Houston, if you watched the Duke game, which I'm assuming you did if you're listening to this show, LJ Cryer was outstanding. LJ Cryer is not an easy shot taker and maker. He makes really difficult shots, right? Like the flow of Houston's offense does not generate clean looks. It's one of the reasons that I've been picking against them a lot, right? And LJ Cryer, though, is a guy that can make tough shots. And against Duke, he was 8 for 14 from the field. He was 6 for 9 from 3. He had 26 points. He was outstanding. There's a chance he does that again. To me, that would be the method of playing him. I've mentioned over the course of the season, he is not my favorite type of play in a DraftKings format because of the fact that he is such a highly priced player, but he doesn't do a whole lot in the peripherals, averages about 2 boards, 2 assists, and 1 steal a game. And that's generally not a good profile that I like to pay for. But now we're talking about Showdown DFS, y'all. And if LJ Cryer comes out and he scores 25 plus points, he's probably going to be in the optimal lineup in Showdown. So I definitely think he's a guy that I'm going to be getting some exposure to. I would rather play Roberts at a cheaper price tag than Cryer, but I'm going to be having a lot of Cryer. Now, it's also important to note this. Roberts was the usage leader in that game against Duke. Cryer took the most shots, which also kind of sheds a little bit of light on this. Cryer ain't passing the ball a whole lot, y'all. So, that's the reason how Roberts had more usage but less shots, because Roberts actually got some assists. So Cryer, very dependent on his scoring, but he could absolutely go out there and drop 30 and it wouldn't shock anybody. Now, I'd also do like Milos Uzan here in this game. He is Houston's starting point guard. He is their peripheral stat guy, and Houston is a team that is going to look to pace up this Houston squad. Florida is a team that's going to look to pace up this Houston squad. So I've done that like 2 or 3 times this episode. So I generally like playing peripheral stat guys in pace up environments, and that would be Milos Uzan here in this game against Florida. He averages 3 boards, 4 assists, and a steal per game. He could absolutely outpace that because of the pace that this game is going to be played at. Now, he's also a guy that he's got to stay out of foul trouble as well. In that Duke game, he had 4 fouls, only played 28 minutes, which is well below his norm. So if he stays out of foul trouble, he plays max minutes, he's going to put up a ton of stats. Now, Emmanuel Sharp is a guy that I don't play a whole lot in DFS at all because everything that I said about LJ Cryer, he's kind of the junior version of that. He's not as good of a pure bucket getter as Cryer, but he can take and make catch and shoot 3-pointers from pretty much anywhere on the court, and that's his value in DraftKings, is making those 3-pointers. And like I said earlier, Florida's strategy against Auburn was to not let them get catch and shoot open threes. I don't think that bodes well for Emmanuel Sharp. I would rather just much pay for LJ Cryer and get the better player than to pay all the way down here to Sharp and kind of get the worst player with less of a profile. Now, the only 2 guys that Houston will play off the bench at the guard spot is Malik Wilson and Terrence Arsenault. Look, I don't like to come on here in a public forum and bash college kids. I generally don't. So I kind of try to say things that are like objectively true. Objectively, Malik Wilson was not good against Duke. He only played 8 minutes. He was not good on either side of the ball. And he put up 6 DraftKings points. Kelvin Sampson realized that he wasn't playing well, and so he didn't really play him a whole lot the rest of the game. One thing that would help Wilson, though, Wilson would play more minutes if the guards were to get in foul trouble. And Wilson is a really good defender. So he's a guy that could come in, and if Walter Clayton is torching all Houston starting guards, he's a guy that could be used as a different option in order to guard him. Honestly, I don't know who Houston is going to guard Walter Clayton with. But I do know that Wilson is a guy that could come off the bench and draw that assignment. So I understand the merits in playing him in that regard. Now, Terrence Arsenault is the other guard that will come off the bench for Houston. He's a better offensive player than Wilson. He did not show it in the Duke game. He played 15 minutes, took 4 shots, missed all 4 of them. Only 5 DraftKings points in that game. So I would personally, I think I would rather play Wilson, but I don't think you really want to play either of them unless you're really telling this story of like, hey, Wilson has to come in to shut down Walter Clayton or something like that. And so don't play Wilson, but don't play Clayton, or really, honestly, if you're really being technical here, if you're playing Wilson, you probably don't want to play more than one of the Houston starting guards, right? Or same thing with Arsenault. You don't want to play more than one of the Houston starting guards because it means that one of them is on the bench if those 2 guys are in the game. Now, the other angle that I would be playing is if you're really thinking that one of these teams blows this game out, Arsenault has been a guy that's been really good in blowouts on the Houston side. And then on the Florida side, Aberdeen has been pretty good in blowouts as well as Thomas Houck. So if you're looking for a blowout on either side, if that's kind of the angle that you're playing, that's just something to consider as well. But all right, y'all, that is our full breakdown of the 2025 National Championship game. I do want to remind you, if you do want more information from me, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have, as well as I tweet out all updates for the show on there. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. It is a community of a bunch of DFS players for a lot of different sports. If you're sitting there thinking, wait a minute, why would I join this when college basketball season's ending? Well, we got every sport covered in there: MLB, NBA, NFL, college football. It's all covered. So join that if you want to be a part of one of the best DFS communities around, and it is 100% entirely free. And then also, I do post my DFS scores for every college basketball, college football slate to my Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. So if you want access to those, that would be the place that you would go. But all right, y'all, that is going to do it for this episode. So as I mentioned, I am rocking with the Gators here on this one. Maybe I should have been rocking with Florida in the Survivor all along. I was just so convinced that after watching the NCAA tournament through 3 rounds, that Duke was just the best basketball team, and I still think they might be. But I was so convinced to get away from that and go, predict Duke to win the national championship. But even then, I probably would have been picking Duke to beat Houston Saturday night anyway. So it is what it is. I'm willing to admit the loss in the Survivor. I made it pretty far, had a good run. But if you guys did watch the bracket breakdown show back that we did before the NCAA tournament, you remember I had my dad on and he picked Houston. I picked Florida. So one of us is going to have the national championship right this year, which is something that we have not done either the last 2 years, because if you remember the bracket show from 2024, both of us were trying to talk ourselves into picking somebody other than UConn when the answer was just UConn all along. But this year, one of us is going to get it right. We're either going to have Florida or we're going to have Houston. So that's just kind of an Easter egg if you guys did watch that show. All right, but that's going to do it here for this episode, y'all. Like I said, the Final Four delivered. I'm hoping that this national championship will deliver. I really, really think Houston's going to win. It just everything that I've seen in my lifetime of watching basketball, I just believe Houston is better at basketball. But man, if Houston were to pull this off, it would just be a testament to the coaching of Kelvin Sampson and the culture that they have built and the mental toughness that those guys have and the grit that they show. And just props to them if they're able to win and beat 2 teams in a row that I think are just flat out better at basketball than them. So like all the credit in the world to Houston if they do win. But like I said, I'm rolling with the Gators. So that's going to do it for this episode, y'all. Best of luck to you guys on any of your bets, player props, or Showdown DFS lineups here on this slate. If the video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review the audio to help me out a ton if you guys do that. But that's going to end us here for this episode, y'all. Best of luck to you guys. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. And thank you guys for joining us on this 24-25 college basketball season. It's been a blast. This will be the last episode because this is the last game. But hopefully we've helped you guys win a little bit. Hopefully we help give you guys some good information. And hopefully you guys will be back for 2025-2026 season. So make sure you're subscribed and you'll know when that starts. But that's going to do it here, y'all. Best of luck to you guys. Have fun watching this game, and I will see you guys next time.